Hello guys, welcome to Redditor's Revenge. Here we post amazing revenge stories daily. And if you want more content like this, please do subscribe to the channel and stay tuned with us. Moving to our today's story, about how OP exacted revenge on his cruel sister by making her homeless. Because she had turned his childhood into a living nightmare. Now story. Deep down, I always hated my sister. It all started way back when I was born. The thing is, it came as a surprise to both my parents and my sister. They had been living their perfect father, wife, daughter nuclear family dynamic for 8 years until I came along. And I always felt like they only wanted one child. This showed, as even though I was the younger child, they still preferred my sister. By preferring my sister, I mean it was mostly my mother, as my father was always working and barely had any time for us. Because my mom only wanted a girl, it meant that she was colder towards me and justified everything that my sister did, even if it was horrific. Now, my sister herself was not right in the head. She didn't have any mental issues or anything, but she was extremely cruel. Because she was such a spoiled brat for 8 years and my parents were not that responsible. They suddenly forced her to take care of me and she did not like that. Anytime she would have to spend time with me, she would take out her anger on me. My mom and dad were outside the house a lot on work and date nights and they traveled a lot. So, if we didn't have a babysitter, my sister would be the one to take care of me and it was hell. She would beat me up, forget to feed me, call me names, force me to watch whatever she liked, and even take away my toys. Of course, I was just a child so I wasn't completely aware of what she was doing, but I was very upset all the time. Every time my parents left the house, I would be utterly terrified of what she would do. Whenever we had guests over or at a birthday party, she would always intentionally embarrass me in front of everyone and even blow out my candles alone. She was ruthless, and what's worse was that she didn't have any friends and barely had anyone in her life, so she was completely free to bully me. It went on like this for years. During her teenage years, she moved from physical assault to just ruining everything she ever wanted. For example, she would make up stories of things I did so that my mom and dad would punish me. She would embarrass me in front of my friends and send out rumors at school, as we both went to the same school. If she was a physical bully when I was a child, then she was a manipulative psychological bully when I was a teenager. When she finished school, I was still in middle school, but I hoped that she would go off to college and leave me alone. But no. She decided not to go to college and just work minimum wage jobs. This made her life even more miserable and made her take it out on me even more. In my mid-teens, she would keep sabotaging any event or outing I wanted to plan or go to. Every time I told my parents, they would just tell me that she was joking around and they never took me seriously. My teens reached the pinnacle of my hate for her, as I simply couldn't stand the sight of her anymore. When I was around 17, I finally decided to fire back. I played her game back to her, and I got her fired from her job working at McDonald's. She never knew who got her fired, but she was jobless for a few months, so she had more free time to start messing with me even more. At one point, when my parents were traveling, she invited a bunch of people from school over, who weren't even her friends, and had them stay in the night, and I was forced to find somewhere else to sleep. In another situation, she took my phone that had my alarm, so I would wake up late and miss my final. This caused me to take a summer course and miss out on the family vacation that she, my mom, and my dad went on. I never really knew why she hated me so bad, as it's not like having to take care of me when I was a child was such a burden. When I finally finished high school, I decided to go to college and then go straight to law school afterward. This was in another state, so I had 7 full years with barely seeing my sister except for holidays, and they were the best 7 years of my life. Things weren't going so well for her, as she kept jumping from job to job and still stayed at our parents' house. Anyway, I decided to stay out of state after finishing law school to become a lawyer. This meant that I had barely any contact with my parents or my sister, until Thanksgiving 2 years ago, when I had to go back and meet everyone. It was the first time the entire family had gathered in months. I barely kept up with my parents and had no idea what my sister was doing, so I was extremely surprised to see that she showed up with a husband. Her husband was a good 20 years older than her, and he clearly only married her to be a trophy wife. And she only married him for his money. He was loaded, and not just because of the Rolls-Royce keychain he flashed everywhere. They both showed up in extremely expensive clothes and were immediately the center of attention from everyone. The whole night, she went on about this extremely implausible love story and how they met and instantly got married because they saw each other as soulmates. I knew her long enough to know when she was lying, and she wasn't fooling anyone. During the night, she suddenly started targeting our cousins, my mom's brother's daughters. My mom's brother was a simple teacher, so the entire family wasn't really rich, but they were well off and lived a normal, simple life. My sister always hated our cousins because they were prettier and more popular than her in school. Both cousins were not married yet and worked minimum wage jobs. This made them the perfect target for my sister, who suddenly kept asking them embarrassing and personal questions about their money, jobs, love life, and future. Eventually, she just started making fun of them and berating them. This caused quite a stir, and other family members quickly came to our cousin's defense. My sister's husband was quiet, and she had him around her finger. Every time someone got back at her, she would tell them they were poor and jealous of her. She kept talking about the amazing vacations her husband took her on and the super expensive stuff he bought her. She even kept flashing around her diamond ring and jewelry in front of everyone. It was very, very uncomfortable, and I just wanted to get out of there as soon as possible. After she fought with every single member of our family, she turned back to me and my parents. She told us about how she hated living in the house and how much she hated me and the fact that I came to mess up her perfect childhood. Even though my parents always put her first, she also attacked them and told them that she wished she had richer parents who had nicer stuff, lived in a nicer house, and went on nicer vacations. At that point, I could see the heartbreak on my parents' faces, even if they were not all that attentive anyway. After that bombshell, the entire house went quiet, as my sister and her husband excused themselves, telling us not to invite them for the next Thanksgiving. We spent the next couple of holidays without them, and there was such a rift that my parents barely even bothered to call her. Strangely, they started giving me more attention, like calling me several times or inviting me to come over frequently. It was nice, but felt about 20 years too late, as I had already set up my life elsewhere and didn't even need them. I was doing very well as a lawyer, and my family was like ancient history to me. I hadn't heard from my sister for 2 years at that point, and I was glad. Still, all that peace of mind eventually came to an end when I suddenly found her at my door in the middle of the night. Once I opened the door, I found her crying and breaking down. Her makeup was all messed up, her clothes were a mess, and she was barely making any sense. I never saw her like that at all in my life. It was like she was a completely different person. She suddenly threw herself into my arms, but I gently pushed her away. We were never close enough for her to hug me now. I honestly did not even want her inside my house, let alone at that time, before she even explained anything to me. I felt good. I had always wished to see her cry, and I finally got my wish. I was being cold towards her, and the only reason I didn't kick her out then and there was just to hear what had happened, not that I was much interested. She told me that a huge fight happened between her and her husband. It started a few months ago when they decided to have a child and tried several times. However, there was no success. They kept thinking that they just needed to try again until they were so hopeless that they went to the doctor to make a checkup. The husband tested first, and it came out to be normal. Apparently, she was hesitant to do the checkup, but her husband kept pressuring her until she finally did it. The results came back while they were having dinner with her husband's family, and it turned out that it was her fault, and that she was infertile. That night, her husband lost it and humiliated her in front of his entire family, shaming her for being infertile and not being a real woman. In his fit of rage, he told her that she was worth nothing to him anymore if she can't give him a child, and he kicked her out in front of the whole house, and didn't even let her take her clothes or her bag with him. This happened 2 days ago. Next, she told me that the next day, she arrived home and went to our parents' house. She begged them to let her in and help her, but they remembered what she had said that one Thanksgiving and refused to let her in after yelling at her and telling her that they never wanted to see her again. After she was rejected by our parents, she hitchhiked to my state to come to visit me as I was her last hope. A part of me kind of wanted to help her and felt bad, but I couldn't let go of the thoughts of the past and how she traumatized me my entire life and made my childhood a living hell. I know that forgiveness in the face of tragedy is good and that anyone can be redeemed, but I simply could not get myself to be nice to her. I gave her some food and enough cash to stay in a motel for a day, but told her that she was not welcome at my house, and that I don't want to help her or see her again. She begged and apologized for everything that she had ever done to me, but an eye for an eye, and I told her to leave. After 2 days, I got a call from my parents telling me to come over and that it was important. I was sure that it had something to do with my sister, so I kept delaying until they kept pressuring me to go. Eventually, I went there and found my sister in my parents' house. This was surprising since they kicked her out before she came begging for my help. Apparently, after I kicked her out, she stayed in a motel for a day, and then went back to my parents to literally beg them to take pity on her. Eventually, my parents caved and let her stay for only a couple of days to see what my say will be on the matter. My sister explained to all of us that she and her husband are getting a divorce, but that her husband is refusing to pay a dime to her. She is upset and hurt by the fact that she won't get any money, and it's only because she didn't give him any kids. Her husband is very rich, and more importantly, he's very powerful with a lot of connections. I would have been scared to go toe-to-toe with his lawyers if I even wanted the case. I knew this was a losing battle to begin with, but that wasn't the reason. Although she was at her lowest point in life, I still couldn't forget what she did to me my entire life, so I refused to take the case. Even my parents were slightly surprised, but I had no more naivety to give her. She told us that without his money and our support, she will literally live on the street without anyone to go to. To be honest, I simply did not care. The scars I have on my body from our childhood will never go. That night, the rest of our family heard about what had happened and came over. I thought they were coming over to discuss this and see the options, but it was for a completely different reason. They didn't even want to listen to her or what happened to her, as they literally just wanted to gloat. Our cousins absolutely humiliated her to the point of crying. They made fun of her for being homeless, infertile, poor, and having no possible future whatsoever, and that it was better to just not exist. The family sat by as our cousins got their revenge. After they were finished, the rest of the family joined in on the degradation party and completely tore her apart psychologically. My sister did nothing but cry the entire time and had absolutely no energy to respond or defend herself. Even my parents did not comment, as they couldn't shake the harsh words she had told them before. At this point, it was the perfect opportunity to talk all about what she did to me as children, and all the abuse, bullying, and manipulation I received. While my parents always ignored it when we were children, they finally believed me and couldn't believe it. They even apologized for not listening earlier. After a few hours of complete humiliation, our family told our parents to kick her out, and they did. We didn't know what she would do or where she would go, and we didn't care. I thought that my sister would go to my senior lawyer friend, whom I had known since school, for help. He was always very kind, and although she hated me, she liked him. He lived in the city, so he was close enough for her to go to him. I had to be quick, so I called him on the phone to explain the whole situation to him and that he shouldn't take her case. To my surprise, she was literally waiting in his waiting area in the firm to go talk to him. He tried to convince me to sympathize and be the bigger man, but it was way past time for that. I told him that if he wanted to continue being friends with me, he wouldn't take her case. After some arguing, he said okay and that he would let her out. The last person I needed to call was her husband. I told him that we wouldn't be suing and that he can do whatever he wants, but that he was still a bad person for what he was doing. I made sure he knew that if it were any other person than my sister, I would have gone after him hard at court, but because of the complicated relationship between me and my sister, I was going to let it slide. He told me that he doesn't even care about her anymore and that he had already gotten married to someone else that morning. A man like him cared little for love and only for self-interest and gain. A couple of years passed and I had almost forgotten about the whole thing. It was Thanksgiving Day again, and so I was going over to my parents' house. Of course, my sister missed the last 2 Thanksgivings, and we had absolutely no clue what happened to her or where she went. All of a sudden, all of her social media profiles were deleted and it was like she was a ghost. On my way to my parents' house, I stopped near a bar where I took a minute to look at the sights. Inside, I saw a woman, beaten up with rough clothes and sitting on the floor, counting change. I tried to focus, and to my surprise, it was my sister. She had become completely homeless, sleeping in parks, and begging for money on the street. We made eye contact for a split second before I went back to my car and drove off. What goes around, comes around. The sister's husband, in my opinion, was immoral, and his actions cannot be justified, but the sister is a complete witch, and she does not deserve to be a mother. It's just all karma that what goes around comes around. Also, I believe the OP's parents were equally to blame for abandoning him and raising her as a pampered brat. Now, here is the end of our today's video. I hope you are enjoying my content. And guys, let me know your opinion about OP's sister. And what do you think, does she deserves what she got or not? So before leaving, please hit the like button and do subscribe to the channel to stay tuned with us for more awesome stories.